Hey everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Today we're going to be talking about Bond, James Bond. We're going to be taking a quick look at the Gilbert James Bond action figure. They produced these in 65 and 66. This is a pretty well-regarded action figure, and they go for a decent price on the secondary market. I was fortunate enough to get one at a really good price. Otherwise, frankly, I probably couldn't afford these. My guy is, he's sockless. But other than that, fully clothed with shoes, and that's usually a good sign. So, A.C. Gilbert and Company was a toy maker, one of the largest in the world at one point. I think founded in like 1908, 1909. Probably most famous for the Erector sets. That probably kind of built their legacy. But again, in 1965-66, they got the James Bond license, and they actually produced quite a lot of toys in that license. We get the kind of standard James Bond in the tuxedo. We get, and these are images I found on Pinterest. We get the scuba diving one that you'd see like in Dr. No. And I don't know if you can notice in that image a little pistol down on the ground there. That was a cap pistol, so that would actually make noises. We got James Bond as an agent of the Ministry of Silly Walks. We got James Bond in a trench coat. They also did an Odd Job figure, which is really cool. They did some miniatures, and they look really good, and they made quite a few of those. You got the Aston Martin with a guy shooting out the back from an ejection seat, which is pretty awesome. And we also got James Bond action puppets. And I think we can all agree that the world does not have enough action puppets at this point in time. Now, this is an image from PlaidStallions.com. Should always go check that site out. This is Gilbert's catalog from, I think, 1966. And you see, within this line, you not only had James Bond and Odd Job, they also had The Man from U.N.C.L.E. They had Honey West. I've reviewed that show a while back. I'll maybe put a link in the description to that one if you want to check it out. And I want to say the astronaut was something like Mike McMoon, or it was some name like that. I've seen a couple references to it. But a pretty good toy line. Let's take a look at this figure. We're about, we're in the Barbie scale, essentially, with these figures. It's a pretty good likeness of Sean Connery. I wouldn't call it a great likeness. I don't think there were any issues with them not wanting to make it look too close to Bond, to avoid having to pay Sean Connery for something. I don't think that's the case, but it's a pretty good likeness of the Bond character. Now, his outfit here it could be a little better fitting. I'm not entirely positive if this was a James Bond outfit, or if it was maybe came from somewhere else. The only reason being I haven't seen any pictures of it anywhere. When I first looked at it, I thought he had an ascot on, and then I realized, no, it's just the shirt. The collars don't want to stay down particularly well. It's a fairly simple construction. We do not have bendable knees or elbows, so it's very much like the Barbie dolls of the time, which I guess was pretty standard. Obviously, G.I. Joe would come along, and you'd get, much more posable bodies. Now, he did come, like they say, with a cap gun. I don't have the cap gun. Like I said, I was pretty lucky to be able to get this figure at all, and that was because somebody had it on eBay at a very reasonable price, and I was rather surprised that I managed to get a hold of it. But I did want him to be armed because he is a secret agent and it can be dangerous out there. And so via Cotswold Collectibles, I managed to get a little, I don't know if you call it a Walther. Is it PPK or Walter? In German it'd be Walter. But anyways, it works fairly well. It'll stay in his hand. I do notice also that my Bond is missing a finger, so he likely ran into trouble with the Yakuza at some point. But it's a cool figure for display. Something I was happy to find, again, because they typically go for a fairly good amount on, in auctions, and not something I thought I was ever going to get a hold of. And I think he'll look pretty good with some of the other taller figures that I have. Bond was just such an amazing, well, I hate to use the term franchise, but it was back in the day. It really revolutionized espionage movies and kind of, in some ways, created the espionage movie genre. Up till then, you certainly had those, and you had them in World War II, but they did not have the same look, the same feel as the Bond films did. And pretty much everything after that, for quite a while, needed to have that James Bond look to it. Unless you were talking about maybe a much more serious film, not an action film, but a more serious drama type film about espionage. Those are going to feel different. But the action stuff, all based upon the James Bond franchise, really, you get movies like In Like Flint. You get the Dean Martin's films. Why am I suddenly blanking on the name of those? The Wreckers. Matt Helm. Thank you. Matt Helm films. And those were almost more parodies of it. They kind of leaned into it a little bit with, lots of sexy women and crazy devices and crazy action scenes. The Bond films always took it much more seriously than most of the stuff that came after. Man from U.N.C.L.E. was a little more serious in its first season, got a little campier afterwards. I think that was part of the Batman effect. But all these things kind of wrapped together in that mid to late 60s milieu, and are really fun to watch. And I don't think it was something they managed to really continue beyond the early 80s. Of course, Sean Connery is our first movie Bond. There was actually a TV version for American television that turned him into an American agent. We won't count that here. They kind of messed with it. It was a Casino Royale adaptation, essentially. But Connery was our first Bond. That was the Bond my dad knew, that sit me down and watch Goldfinger, and he's like, oh, no, this is a real movie. This is what you really want to watch. Now, I grew up in the Roger Moore era, so that's sort of my James Bond. I know there's a lot of people that have trouble with Roger Moore. It was too campy, whatever. I don't care. They're all kind of campy, to be quite frank. And so Roger Moore was my favorite and remains my favorite. I just, the joy of, like, I don't know if it'd be like a Friday movie or Saturday movie or whatever on TV where it was James Bond. It was like, oh, awesome, it's a Bond film. It was an event. It was a big deal, especially for kids. You didn't necessarily get to go see him in the movie theater. So Roger Moore was my guy. I actually liked Timothy Dalton. His first movie, The Living Daylights, I liked a lot. The second one, not quite as much. I was all revved up for Pierce Brosnan. I was super excited he was going to take over the role. And I got to be honest, the first Brosnan film didn't do that much for me. I didn't really enjoy it that much. I don't know, I came out of it just sort of like kind of flat. And really didn't watch the other ones. It just felt like the whole concept at that point was a little bit played out. It was, I think, getting harder for them to do the grandiose stuff, to do the spectacle that was going to top the spectacle from the last movie. And there's all these kind of things have a shelf date. They don't go on forever, and we're finding that out now with the superhero movies. But we had it at one point with westerns, and we had it with the spy movies, and we had it with fantasy movies and barbarian flicks, and you name it. You're going to have it with everything. You kind of get to a point where you got to stop for a while, then maybe come back to it later. And obviously there have been some more modern spy pictures done without quite the feel of James Bond. And they've tried to, reinvent them now for more modern audiences, as they say, with, I'd say, pretty limited success. Are they going to give up on them? No, because it feels like Money in the Bank. But I don't know. I don't know that James Bond exists particularly well in a post-Cold War era, and I don't know that he exists terribly well in a smartphone internet era. He kind of belongs to the 60s and 70s, and that's definitely my favorite period for the character. But here we have it, the Gilbert James Bond action figure. See if we can get his arm a little higher up. I don't want to menace anybody with the steely gaze of Sean Connery. But the Gilbert James Bond, part of a series they did, like I said, with Honey West and Man from U.N.C.L.E. Very cool. I think great for display. I don't know how much play action kids would have gotten with these, because you really didn't have a villain for them to chase around. I think every toy line that doesn't have a good bad guy probably ultimately suffers. I think the best usually have somebody that they can go up against. This would have just been kids with their imagination running around the house. Oh, I shot you, no, you didn't. Oh, we did, but I don't think we didn't get like a Blofeld. We didn't get any Spectre agents. I think that probably would have made it a bigger toy line. And that's probably why the characters, like in auction, go for a fairly good amount. I don't know how many of these ultimately sold. They probably didn't get the mass production out of them that they wanted. And so finding them on the secondary market is a little bit tougher, especially in very good condition. And again, mine's missing a finger, and his suit's a little crumpled. But still, I think it's going to look good on the shelf, and I'm happy to have gotten it. So there you go. A whirlwind review of Sean Connery, James Bond from Gilbert. A very cool action figure. Did you have any of these when you were a kid? Have any good memories of the James Bond franchise? And who was your favorite Bond? There's no wrong answers there, folks. There's no wrong answers. Who's your favorite Bond? Well, okay, if Woody Allen's your favorite Bond, maybe that's a wrong answer. But outside of that, even if you go into David Niven territory, I don't think you're wrong about James Bond. So, if you want to share any of those memories in the comments, I'd love to see it. I'd love to hear them, and I'd love to chat about that. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. That helps me out on creating my channel here. Maybe think about subscribing if you enjoy videos about toys and movies and TV and all the good pop culture stuff from the 1930s into the 1990s, and even some cool, weird stuff from today. So maybe think about subscribing, maybe share with a friend. I'd really appreciate it if you would. With that said, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another and try to have some fun out there. And I will see you the next time in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Talk to you later, Moneypenny.